Fear keeps us in bondage and robs us of our ability to connect with others emotionally and spiritually. But the benefits of freedom are priceless. Welcome to Freedom Alive. From his writings in the Wall Street Journal to his speech in front of the U.S. Supreme Court to his role as the Surgeon General of Florida, Dr. Joseph Ladapo has shown tremendous courage in the face of extraordinary resistance. Dr. Ladapo has modeled fearless leadership in creating health policies throughout COVID that protected freedom in the state. And now we're seeing that same leadership help protect children and parents from radical LGBTQ ideology. Dr. Ladapo joins us today to share more of his personal story of overcoming fear, as well as how he is helping others do the same. I'm thankful to be joined again by our co-host, Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel. And Matt, what I really appreciate about Dr. Ladapo is that he looks at facts and common sense instead of using fear to make decisions, especially regarding public health. And he sets an incredible example for other medical professionals to do the same.
He is Florida's Surgeon General, appointed by Governor Ron DeSantis, and he is the best Surgeon General I can imagine I've ever seen of any state, certainly in Florida, but he is an example of Surgeon Generals around the country. He's someone who is highly credentialed. His background is impeccable. He's highly trained, and someone also who sticks to the facts. And he's not going to just follow the CDC or the FDA just because they say so. He's going to do his own research, and he's not afraid to speak truth when it goes against the grain. And so, his new book, Transcend Fear, a blueprint for mindful leadership in public health. It's actually a blueprint for leadership in every area of life, but certainly in the area of public health. And we need voices like Dr. Ladapo today more than ever, particularly in the area of public health. One thing that COVID clearly showed us is that the whole public health system has been captured and controlled by the pharmaceutical industry, and the agencies of the United States that are designed to protect us are now the lapdogs of the pharmaceutical companies. And we need a transformation of the public health system, and he is a very refreshing voice at such a time as this.
Yes, I completely agree. I'm very thankful for his presence during such a difficult time. This is a remarkable story of courageous leadership. We cannot wait to bring it to you. Our Freedom Alert is next.
A court sides with religious freedom in an employment case. I'm Matt Staver, co-host of Freedom Alive. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that a Christian-owned business can hire or fire employees based on the company's deeply held religious beliefs. The court unanimously ruled that the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or RFRA, protects not just a church, but a private entity from violating their religious beliefs by employing someone whose beliefs or conduct does not align with the company's views. In this case, RFRA protects a Christian business from having to employ homosexual or gender dysphoric employees who don't align with the company's biblical views on sexuality and marriage. The unanimous decision from the appeals court is a great victory for religious freedom. Businesses must be free to operate in a manner consistent with their faith and convictions.
Up next, Matt's interview with Dr. Joseph Ladapo.
I'm very pleased to welcome our very special guest, Dr. Joseph Ladapo. He is the Surgeon General of the state of Florida, and he has written a book called Transcending Fear, or Transcended Fear. Welcome, Dr. Ladapo, to Freedom Alive.
Hey, thank you. Really happy to be joining you guys.
Dr. Ladapo, so much appreciate your leadership as Surgeon General. I wish we had 50 Surgeon Generals like you and a 51st one at the United States Capitol, in our nation's capital. But you have been a very good breath of fresh air in Florida and around the country. But before we talk about some of the policies that you've had to address, and thus the reason behind your book, Transcend Fear, I want to have you give us a little background from your growing up childhood that ultimately is part of your book, Transcend Fear.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so I would say that that we all come into the world, and most people are trying the best they can. And that was definitely the case with my own parents. At the same time, we all generally pick up things from our environment. So we pick up fears and anxiety and apprehension and other things that are going on with our loved ones and our parents and other people, even in previous generations. And that was no different for me.
That's amazing. So you begin your career in the medical field. You have a stellar educational background. You're a professor, and then you get a call one day to be the Surgeon General of the state of Florida. And the rest is history. You get nominated by the Governor Ron DeSantis, confirmed. And now you're in this position at a very critical time, probably the most critical time in public health history, at least certainly in our lifetime, maybe in the history of America. And that's when we're in the middle of the COVID pandemic. Tell us about what it was like in your leadership there, because there's so much information, disinformation, information that we just didn't know. And you had to, as Surgeon General, walk through that process and make some very difficult decisions against the grain of so many others that were pushing the opposite way.
That is right. And I was a professor at UCLA. I was tenured when I fortunately got the call from Governor DeSantis's office, which I'm really grateful for, and really grateful to him and for all he had been doing, often really alone, during the pandemic, to really to buck the really harmful policies that were coming out of the CDC and the federal government. And when I arrived here, we continued along that path and did some more things too. And I think the way to think about it is to understand that there has been a campaign of dishonesty that has been waged continuously by the CDC and the FDA and other health officials since early on in the pandemic. It started early on with the masks and that whole ridiculous period of time we went through as a country, where people thought that the answer to being healthy was sticking something over your face all day while you were walking around, rather than improving your diet in terms of vegetables and fruits, improving your strength, your immune strength with physical activity and exercise and fresh air. And it continued after that. It continued into the COVID-19 vaccines and the mandates that came with them. And there, it was really a campaign of dishonesty with science, particularly with science about safety. There was dishonesty in terms of efficacy and waning efficacy and all that stuff. And at this point, actually, there are multiple studies that show that these boosters are eventually associated with an increased risk of infection, which is ridiculous. I mean, it's like the CDC and the FDA and a lot of my colleagues, frankly, are playing this tune and hypnotizing people. It is not normal for a vaccine or anything to increase your risk of contracting an illness. I mean, that's just perverse. But that is the case. Multiple studies show that. So that would be my summary. And really what we've been doing is just, holding up a mirror to the truth and just really talking about what actual scientific data is showing and where there's uncertainty.
Dr. Ladapo, for a lot of us who are not in the medical field, the COVID results, the reaction by the CDC, the FDA, these different lockdowns and so forth, was a wake-up call and really a question time for many of us regarding the whole medical profession. But that obviously didn't just come out of nowhere. It had to be something within the medical profession, the pharmaceutical industry, the agencies of the federal government that had been latent and percolating for some time. Did you see that in the process of your medical career? Did you see something like that forthcoming? And I want to talk about what we do about these situations now going forward. But was that something that was obvious, or did it just become manifest during COVID?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So one of the a strength that I have is that I actually was a victim of the of the scheme, if you will, to get physicians to treat vaccines as a religion. I have a PhD, as you say. I have a lot of research training. I've published a lot of papers. I've had, I think, a total of 5 or 6 NIH grants during my career as a professor. So I've had a successful career as a researcher, and so I had that training. And related to what you're saying, during the pandemic, as people were literally misrepresenting science related to masking, related to the harms of isolation, and related to these ridiculous school closure policies, and not recognizing that, or choosing not to recognize that they would have massively detrimental consequences, which is exactly what was true. So seeing all that started really rouse my questioning, and in one of those areas, and it's a very important area, is really in the area of vaccines. Unlike other medications, and I have nothing, I have nothing for or against vaccines, and that's actually exactly the point. That's how doctors are typically trained about medications. There's nothing particularly special, or there's no particular class that a medication gets beyond what it does and what its risks are. Mm-hmm. So there's no allegiance, if you will, to medications. They have their benefits, they have their risks. We evaluate them, we make a decision. That's how it should be for everything, because that's the only way to make good decisions. But with vaccines, I was part of a group of medical professionals and medical students, like pretty much everywhere else in the country, that not only got some information about benefits and risks, but also got indoctrination about how we should think about them, about them being this universal good. And the problem with that is that you can't make good decisions if you're indoctrinated. And so, as being a victim of indoctrination, if you will, helped me experience the contrast of realizing that not only is there this indoctrination going on in schools, but sadly, it's not to the benefit of people, it's to the benefit of pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical companies, you get to make a drug, doctors promote it for you, and doctors have trouble seeing clearly in terms of weighing a balance between risk and benefits, such to the point that you have doctors recommending healthy children take new COVID-19 vaccines. Hopefully more and more people realize that's insane. Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of crazy thinking that happens when an individual is indoctrinated, right? Because it's a belief system. It's not about the data. So that was my experience.
Going back to the 1980s, when the pharmaceutical companies lobbied Congress for this immunity, saying that if you don't give us immunity, we're going to stop making vaccines. That was one of the terrible decisions of Congress and the president at the time, Ronald Reagan, to sign it. And now what we have is vaccines are in a completely different category than any other drug, that if there's a cause of injury, there's no recourse other than from the Vaccine Compensation Fund, which is very difficult to process, but there's no accountability. If we had that right now with COVID, I'm sure that a lot of these makers of vaccines, the COVID shots, they would have stopped a long time ago, because they would have had billions of dollars of lawsuits against them. Now, with regards to the issue of vaccines, you have in your book, from hydroxychloroquine to fluoxamine, treating patients with COVID-19. You talk about treating patients with other kinds of ways than the COVID shots that were being pushed by the CDC and the FDA. I know you got a lot of pushback on some of that, but how did you get to that position?
Yeah. I got to that position really by just looking at the data and making an assessment with the training that I have. The one that, so I write about hydroxychloroquine, and I also write about fluvoxamine. And budesonide is another drug that has pretty good data. So with hydroxychloroquine, it's interesting. I write about it in the book. There are multiple clinical trials. Most of them don't show a significant benefit. In fact, most, if not virtually all of them, don't show a significant benefit. But what is interesting is that those studies generally were, they have some drawbacks related to sample size and statistical power. And when you look at the studies in combination, you have more precision in terms of whether or not those non-statistical findings are statistically significant. And my sense from looking at the data is that with hydroxychloroquine, you actually do have that the multiple studies that are leaning in the direction of benefit, and that there likely is a modest benefit associated with its early use. And I know that that's not popular, but it's not, I mean, people were having a lot of trouble with hydroxychloroquine because President Trump said something about it. And so many people just wanted to be on the other side of whatever it was he said. If the sun comes up, if the sun rises, it rises in the west, I swear,
Yeah.
And then with fluvoxamine, it's a cleaner story. With fluvoxamine, you actually do have a few randomized clinical trials and have shown benefit, and moderate to substantial benefit. There are also some that haven't, but when you look more closely at the data, what you find is that the ones that haven't, in general, they use 50% of the dose. So they use a much smaller dose. Probably the problem with them, because the studies that have used the larger dose generally do find a benefit. So that's another medication that has some evidence, and it's really just about looking at the data and not. It's like separating yourself from the hypnotic state of believing that you've got to do something for that's really just speaking to your political, philosophy, and just putting that aside and just looking at data and not caring about who's right and who's wrong.
One of the things that we're seeing in the country, certainly in Central Florida where I'm located, is a monopolization of the medical community by mega hospitals that are buying up different private practitioners, and so many different people are leaving their private practice, and they're being part of one or another, in some places only one, particular large mega medical center. So now that medical center gets money from the government, say, for example, during COVID, to treat patients with a certain protocol. And if they don't treat with that protocol, they don't get the money. If they treat with the protocol, they get the money. So it seems as though what's happening is a loss of independence of the individual medical practitioner and the scientist, particularly in this medical field, that is being sucked up into a conglomerate of a megalopolis, if you will, of different medical centers, and in some cases controlled by money from the federal government when they want to give incentives or direct medicine. How do we break the system? One of the things I think that we have seen during COVID is that there is a crisis, I believe, within the medical profession. There is a loss of autonomy. There's a loss of critical thinking. There's a loss of just a questioning and curiosity. How do we change the system to make it better?
Those are really great points. And it's a very tough situation. Dr. Simone Gold comes to mind. So she's developing a new system for providing care. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned autonomy. So multiple surveys show that doctors' level of happiness and satisfaction with their work has just plummeted over the past few decades. I mean, it really is. And my sense is that the key piece is autonomy. People would, in terms of satisfaction, I am certain that given the choice between having more control over the direction of your practice and how you direct your energy, many people would happily trade income. And I'm not even sure that you have to trade income, but would happily trade income for more control. Mm-hmm. And now what you have on a very prevalent level is corporations who are dictating to doctors. And many doctors are miserable. And of course you'd be miserable. I mean, when you go through all this school and all this training, you're not doing that to have someone telling you what to do all day. You're doing that so that you can do what you want to do. That's why you did all this training and invested all this time and resources. So it's not a surprise that so many doctors are miserable. And I think it's going to take some real leadership at a higher level to change the incentives and help more doctors be able to practice with more autonomy.
Yes, indeed. COVID certainly showed us that there needs to be a reform in our medical system. And I think it really has also made many of us question our doctors, and many people have changed their doctors. And I think there's been a loss of trust within the medical profession towards the medical profession by individuals who were given wrong advice, who were told to get the shot when they knew their own research that wasn't beneficial for them. In fact, it may have been contraindicated, that downplayed other alternative nutraceuticals and other kind of medical drugs that were proven effective. Those kinds of advices that were given from different doctors, I think, caused a fracture of the trust. How does that fracture of the trust get restored? And then what's the path forward for us to reform this system that we're in part of?
It's a real mess. I think the thing about trust is that trust is it's hard to earn. It's invaluable when you earn it, and you can lose it in a moment. And that's where we are, So it is hard to earn back. And I honestly, I don't know what it's gonna take. My hope is that we really have, there are a lot of things happening. My boss is running for president, and my hope is that we get to a point where we have the type of leaders that can lead the type of revolution that we need, right? A revolution that really does do a better job at putting the patient first and prioritizes physician's judgment, whatever judgment that is, in terms of what doctors think should happen clinically, rather than this dancing to the fiddle of corporations. I think those are pieces, and I think I think it's going to be hard work, and it's definitely going to be hard work. But I think you really need the right type of leadership, very special to do it.
Well, on the vaccines, I think we need to repeal the law in the 1980s that gave these pharmaceutical companies immunity. But also, one of the things you see happening is some of the board certification organizations, these private entities, that actually seemed as though coordinated letters in 2022 to physicians of various certification boards saying essentially the same thing, that their statements, and these are highly credentialed individuals that you well know, could be misinformation or disinformation and threaten their continued certification in their various respective boards, whether it's internal medicine, cardiology, family practice, pathology, whatever it might be.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And by the way, I totally agree with you that law should be absolutely repealed. And the other thing that should end is all the commercials. These commercials are they're such a gift to the pharmaceutical companies to be able to do that type of marketing. That's where most of their money goes, or at least. I'm trying to remember the exact numbers from a book I recently read, but the amount of money that goes into marketing is typically, I believe, exceeds the amount that goes into research and development, right? I mean, they're investing resources based on where they think returns are going to be best. So yeah, the commercials need to go, but it should just not be legal. And I think of Dr. John Littell. He's a family medicine doctor here in Florida who's dealing with just a highly political board, and that's what they are. Not a political board, but a political. Well, actually, it is American Board of Family Medicine. Mm-hmm. It's just incredibly political. The guy's he's a great doctor.
Yeah,
he's practiced decades, and has helped many patients. And they want to activate the gorilla, the 900-pound gorilla, because they don't agree with his opinions, not because of the care that he provided to a patient, but literally because they don't agree with his opinions. How cuckoo is that? Yeah. It's totally nuts. So I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you.
Well, as a resident of the state of Florida, I am honored to be here with the Florida Surgeon General, and I wish that all the states that are watching this would have a Surgeon General as competent and qualified and as bold as our guest, Dr. Joseph Ladapo. His book is called Transcend Fear, a blueprint for mindful leadership in public health. Dr. Ladapo, thank you for being our guest on Freedom Alive.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks so much.
Matt, what insights from Dr. Ladapo. Amazing. And the book, Transcend Fear, right? How appropriately named when he describes a campaign of dishonesty waged continuously by the CDC, FDA, and others since the very early stages of COVID.
That's really an interesting statement coming from the Surgeon General of the state of Florida, who is highly credentialed and someone who is a specific individual trained in medical research, that this was a campaign of dishonesty by our federal government with regards to COVID. With respect to the COVID condition itself, alternative treatment that involves nutraceuticals, other kinds of FDA-approved medications, and then also when the COVID-19 shots came available as well, a continual disinformation campaign. And this was coming from the Surgeon General of the state of Florida. Mm-hmm. This really validates so many people's questions and concerns that they had about what we experienced during COVID.
The entire team at Freedom Alive is so thankful at the guest that we continuously are able to bring into your home. We just faithfully and obediently try to answer God's call and try to bring the truth to people about a myriad of issues. And we look forward to it each and every week. But gosh, so thankful at the guest that we're able to bring into your home with each episode. In closing, remember Galatians 5, verse 1, which says, "It was for freedom that Christ set us free. Therefore, keep standing firm. Do not be subject again to a yoke of slavery." Our freedom is a gift from our Creator. We must never forget that and always protect it. Join us here next time. You'll hear victories as well as ways you can stand up for your priceless freedom. Join us again for Freedom Alive.